Day is almost done. I don't know how much, you know, everything means on one regard, but there's 4:18 p.m. and when I woke up this morning. There's a lot of very intensive recalibration going on, and I caught a lot of it, right? Even though I was supposed to be asleep, I was in that in between zone. It happens. But there's a couple of things that it kind of precedes as a follow up. Today is 2 days before what was the dismissal of an appeal for an attorney that was disbarred. I've talked about that elsewhere. And after the case was denied, something happened on October 10th of 2019. The problem is October 10th is one of those dates, 1010, it's been coming up for me for years. And on October 10th of 2017, I wrote a business plan. It was the business plan for my idea called Space Hawk. I'm not going to talk about that now. Nobody's ever read it. I've never given it to anybody to read. I've never let anybody see it. But it was stolen. And it was connected to an effort I made to contact some people after I had composed a personal treaty with an understanding that other people were attempting to avail themselves without my consent of things they had no business trying to access. But the correlations with October 10th were very specific, and part of what was happening at the time I made this business plan was that there was a very significant act of etheric and electronic sexual violence going on connected to me and people that I was involved with at the time. I learned last year that several years ago, who is now currently senator, but at the time was the Solicitor General of Texas, Ted Cruz, had an argument before the Supreme Court of the United States regarding a case that he was arguing. And while he was arguing this case, that same day in Houston, Texas, the co-diocese of the Catholic Church was involved in litigation where there were a number, more than 10 people, listed as plaintiffs in a suit regarding sexual violence against the Catholic Church. And my understanding is that what happened is that somebody used the argument that Ted Cruz presented before the Supreme Court and underwrote securities using the allegations of sexual abuse concerning the Catholic Church in order to create some sort of electronic account. And that because my life had already previously been used in processes directly connected to events in Ted Cruz's, all the way back to 2005 when I first came to Texas. It was working for a capital defense law firm at the time. That this has impacted my life, and that part of the efforts to combine these processes, for whatever reason was justified at the time, were also present in 2010 when I was sent to San Francisco and subjected to repeated acts of electronic and sexual violence. My understanding now is that at that time, I had been put into processes concerning capital outlays regarding the federal budget. And because I had refused to accede to cooperation with activity that I understood was not only illegal but unconscionable, somebody decided they would teach me a lesson and reprogram me. And what they did was not only fraudulent and unconstitutional, but actually constitutes high crimes that have been demonstrated and proven over the years. The point of the matter is that somebody engaged in what I call sex terrorism as a way to retaliate against me. And because of the failure of the former Solicitor General of Texas and the current senator or any member of the government to respond to any of my efforts to contact them in efforts to try to prevent escalation of events up to national security incidents that literally constitute acts of terrorism. I have no reason to disbelieve at this point anymore that Ted Cruz himself did not cooperate with this, perhaps in an understanding that it would give him some sort of leverage he would need if he were to actually be elected president as part of what otherwise might be characterized as a nuclear paradigm. Now, just let me tell you, I don't believe in that kind of nuclear paradigm. It's completely unconscionable and it's actually unnecessary if you actually have a mind toward a stable or a prosperous society. If you have some ulterior motive that is supranational or that engages in some sort of concept of legitimizing debauchery, or attempts to ensnare other people into occult or dark arts as part of some liege or slave system, I'm not really interested in giving you any legitimacy. But at the same time, this is something that impacted me directly. And the timing on this transfer that the courts did, when it completely and intentionally mischaracterized my efforts to try to alert them, at least, to my understanding that they had engaged in, if nothing else, acts of securities fraud by allowing for a misrepresentation of the case and the status of the appeal by virtue of the fact that it was associated with a fraudulent transcript that had been materially altered in order to reflect different facts after the initial appeal and as part of the proceedings engaging the other appeal, and could potentially be indicative of other very significant and substantial crimes, considering the fact that it was understood that there were other processes going on and other associations with the case, including an understanding of what derivative litigation is by virtue of the people alleging to be qualified to associate themselves with the case. Now, the other thing that happened last year, and I've been able to find the documentation, is that Blackstone, which is a company that, if nothing else, has significant investment paradigms associated with the Houston police officers' pension system, had a very, very significant investment activity within a 3 to 5 day period where they engaged in some very strategic processes regarding not only the legal system but also the financial reporting system. I believe that they actually took information connected to a variety of things, but up to and including however it was that they were able to illegally acquire information on my Spacehawk business plan. And they created some sort of systematology involving a number of investment entities within their organization to basically effectively do illicit activities and to repurpose and redesign conceptually as well as practically what Spacehawk was meant to do. And that after that, there was a situation with the Philadelphia Energy Solutions. It was supposed to be connected to a deactivation of a shale facility connected to the Appalachian Shelf that is connected, if nothing else, through people attempting to appeal as part of the bankruptcy proceeding, but that has a very specific, direct, literal correlation with these acts of fraud involving those specific elements. And because of the refusal to respond to the acts of sex terrorism that were correlated with the original associations concerning casework connected to Ted Crouse that has somehow been allowed to be connected to events in my life, including events that have sabotaged my political possibilities and that have been used in acts of retaliation against me and its justification and it's the means by which I've been politically disappeared while events from my past have been allowed to be reappropriated and reassigned. It continues to perpetuate this form of sex terrorism. And I believe it is connected to what I witnessed this past summer, where the Supreme Court of Texas took its caseload off long enough. All of the cases on the site disappeared for a period of time, which I understand was a collateralization effort for some, as of yet, not officially disclosed process, but which I believe was allowed to be brokered through the Department of State, and is also being used to finance the election campaigns of numerous people running for public office. And I believe it transcends party lines, but that it is specifically aimed at doing with Republican female freshman candidates this year what was done with Democrat female freshman candidates in 2018, i.e., creating a situation where women are told that they will be investitured as a political person and given political legitimacy if they allow for somebody to weaponize them through acts of sex terrorism for whatever purpose somebody who does something like that justifies it. The problem is who's financing it. And it's not just a matter of who puts their names on and files the SEC filings. It's who are they stealing the actual work products, the actual possibility for it be secure system, the actual other alternative things it was supposed to be instead of the underwriting on acts of sex terrorism. Who are those people? Where are they? And why have we been replaced by people that won't even acknowledge what's financing their campaign. Now, I have no desire to let anybody try to contrive me as some fetishized heroine from an erstwhile political movement that was responsible for arming the revolutionaries. The kind of weapons they're trafficking me to broker should never have been designed and should never be applied or used by anybody. We have over 25 years of chastising people that would never be able to qualify as leadership in the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance, just by virtue of their demographic experience, and yet are supposed to finance it. They were chastised because presumably they came from a former way of being that allowed for these kinds of weapons to be stockpiled and used as inventories upon which they determined the valuation as well as the resources that were accessible to them for either national security purposes or for the purposes of trade with their allies. They were chastised, they were cut off, they were disappeared, they were allowed to be misrepresented as somehow being national security threats, while they were also attempted for enticement and recruitment into clandestine organizing efforts that have a completely eugenicist and apparently genocidal agenda. I'm not one of them. As I said, and I'm on the record as saying, any woman that would take an order from someone like that doesn't deserve to be in leadership. And any woman that would let somebody conspire to underwrite her campaign using acts of sex terrorism doesn't deserve to be in leadership. And any man that would support her doesn't deserve to be either.